Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. Welcome to our last video on lymphatic system, and we're talking about different types of immunity. And of course, I have information to organize, so I create a table, right? So y'all know me, this is my favorite thing to do. I have a table that has 3 columns and 3 rows. And what we're looking at here are different types of immunity. So my first column has no heading. My second column is described as active immunity. And then in parentheses, I have includes memory. And then my third column is called passive immunity. And then in parentheses says no memory. And then looking at my rows, my second row says natural. And my third row says artificial. And in parentheses, produced by scientists. Okay. Active immunity by definition means you have a primary immune response. So let's write that down. Active immunity by definition, you have a primary immune response. That's the only way that you get your memory. And so this means the active part means that you have to have exposure to the pathogen. You have to have exposure to the pathogen. You have to have infected cells. You have to have the pathogen present in your body in order for your cells to do antigen presentation, which ultimately leads to the activation of both your T cells and your B cells. And that's given you a cytotoxic T cell to kill all of those infected cells. And that gives you the antibodies to help grab hold of those pathogens, preventing them from infecting any more of your cells. In the case of the natural active immunity, that's everything that we studied. So this is actually, you're getting the infection, you're getting sick, you're risking tissue, organ damage. So here's the thing. Sometimes being sick is no big deal. You just feel bad. So like a common cold, you have the runny nose, you don't breathe well, your body's tired, maybe you run a little bit of a fever. It's just really unpleasant. You just don't feel well. But for most of us, that's all we deal with. For most of us, then it's like a week of unpleasantness, and then we recover and make up our missed work and just move forward, and everything's fine, right? But number one, even the common cold can be dangerous for some individuals depending on their overall health profile. But then some of our infections actually risk tissue and organ damage that we're then living with for the rest of our life, right? And so actually getting your natural active immunity is great in terms of you should not have to have later illness, but not so great in terms of actually being sick, actually feeling bad, and risking damage to your body that can be lifelong damage. On the flip side of that, we can have active immunity. We can get a primary immune response triggered by exposing ourselves to pieces and parts of the pathogen through vaccination. So in the case of the artificial active immunity, what's happening here is you're basically getting the antigen injected in some form. So sometimes this is, let me go through a couple different ways. Sometimes the antigen is injected in the form of mRNA. So if you remember your chapter 3, we studied that mRNA is messenger RNA, and it actually tells your cell how to make the antigen. So essentially, if you're injecting with mRNA, you're giving your cells the instructions to make the antigen, antigen presentation occurs, and yada, yada, yada. You have your primary immune response. mRNA is a short-lived molecule. So it's something that's present in your cell maybe 48 hours and then it's degraded. The mRNA that you make is short-lived. The mRNA that's injected is short-lived. So it's just a temporary set of instructions for your cell to use to kind of make that protein and then actually have your immune response. One of the benefits to the mRNA vaccine is that it's faster to get it to market. So that might be one reason why we're seeing those being used. The next type we see is called the protein subunit vaccine. And in this case, you are just delivering proteins from that particular virus. So you might have a piece or part of that virus that's including this particular antigen that's used to initiate your immune response. So scientists are isolating what part of the virus our body is responding to, and then we're getting that particular part injected into our body such that our cells are going to go through the whole process of engulfing that particular thing and then having initiating our immune response, right? And then we have also what are called vector vaccines. And vector vaccines, you have a modified version of the virus and the same story. In each of these cases with the vaccine, you're getting an antigen in some way entering the body so that you get to have your immune response, so that you're going to activate B cells and you're going to end up getting antibodies produced, and you have also those memory B cells. But what's not happening is no infection risk. So if you are getting symptoms of like a slight elevated fever, a little bit of tiredness, what's happening is your immune system is acting as if there's an infection, but there's not actually an infection in the body. So if there's no infection risk, there's no risk of having tissue or organ damage. So you're not getting the sickness, the feeling of discomfort, and all of that for several days. And you also are not having the other risks that are potentially associated. You're not getting the other risks that are potentially associated with that particular illness. Okay. The passive immunity is immunity where you do not have memory. So you're actually not initiating an immune response. You're basically, in this case, just receiving antibodies. So you're going to receive antibodies from a source. So in the case of passive immunity, there's no memory because you're not actually doing an immune response. You're just getting those antibodies handed to you from some source. If it's a natural source, then the natural source is from your parent, right? So from your parent. So what we see here is you can get the IgG going across the placenta to the fetus. So here, the parental, maternal IgG is being produced by the parent. The parent has the immune response. The parent has the memory, but the IgG crosses to the fetus. So even at delivery, that fetus has some of these IgG in circulation, kind of buying them time until they're able to produce their own. So the benefit of this IgG crossing the placenta is that the fetus and then the infant will have a little bit of like buying of time, should not be getting super sick in the first month or so of life because these IgG are in circulation. So it's giving the fetus time to, or the infant, I should say, time to get that exposure and have their own immune response. And then we also see those IgA, remember, are going to be present in the colostrum. Colostrum is that first milk that's being produced at lactation. So it's those early days, those first few days of milk production. The colostrum is actually more watery and it's full of these proteins. So we don't actually think of colostrum as milk in the same way, but first milk, I think, is totally fine description. So we are seeing that in the early days of breastfeeding. And again, this is giving the infant at this point some circulating antibodies to help as they are having their own immune responses coming online. When we talk about the artificial passive immunity, then again, this is produced by scientists. So we have created these antibodies and then we can deliver the antibodies. This is going to be a temporary situation because the antibodies are not going to be long-lived, and then you're not getting memory in as a result of this, right? But one example of this, so let me just write in injection of antibody. One example that we've talked about already is the RhoGAM shot, which remember is going to bind to the Rh positive fetal red blood cell, preventing sensitization in the Rh negative pregnant person. So that particular individual doesn't have to worry that their immune response, that their immune system is going to target and attack their developing fetus, right? We talked about that in the cardiovascular system. All right, that's it for lymphatic. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.